Hi, welcome to the Sterling Heights Public Library. My name is Brent. If you've seen some of my previous segments before, we're going to be kind of continuing along those lines. Today we are going to be following along. We've been kind of doing some summery stuff for a little while now, and it's still summer, so let's keep going. Today we are going to play with some coleslaw. So come on down to the board and we'll get started here. Okay, so this here is standard old green cabbage. Okay, it's cheap, it stores really well, it's versatile, you can do a lot of things with it, and today we're going to play around with it a little. So I am going to be playing around with the jalapeno pepper today, so this is going to come in handy. So in order to get one of these things broken down a little bit, get your handy knife, get it so that it's going to, be nice and stable, because frankly these things are dense. It takes a little bit to get through them. You got this core in here. We're going to get that out of there, but we're not going to do that first thing. Okay, so you cut it in half, take it down to quarters, and then all the way down to 1/8 size wedges. And I'll show you why we're doing that here in a moment, because while there are a number of different ways to get this shredded out, there is a very easy way to take the core out. And while you can take these wedges and run them through a food processor or any number of other different ways to get them sliced down, this is a very easy way to shred cabbage. You get down towards the end here, you got to start getting a little bit more careful, because you start getting a little close to your fingers again. You don't want huge chunks of this stuff, but that takes it down to a nice even shred. So I'm going to use a bowl here. Toss that in there for right now. Get that out of the way so it's not blocking our camera angle. We're going to do a little bit more of this. I'm not going to waste a huge amount of time shredding all this cabbage, but we'll get enough going here to show you the process. And give you the idea. I'm going to do about half of this cabbage today. If you're making a bigger batch, you can certainly do the whole thing. And this is a fairly small cabbage. You can get cabbages a whole lot larger than this. You may not see them in the grocery stores, but if you go to a farmer's market, you can often get cabbages that are, 5, 6, 8 pounds. 8 pounds is a lot of cabbage. Very simple, not terribly time consuming. And you don't have to wash your food processor. If you've seen some of my segments before, you'll know that you can do a lot with this knife. Today we're going to season this with just a few ingredients. So I got a little cilantro here. We're going to take the stems off of that. You don't have to get every single stem. Stems on this are pretty tender, and if you get a little stem in there, it does not hurt one little thing. You do want to make sure that you get anything out of here that looks a little sketchy. You don't want wilty or partially nasty cilantro. You do have to kind of watch that with this stuff once in a while. Now, some people don't like cilantro. If you don't, leave it out. You don't need to use this if you don't like it. This just happens to be a particular flavor combination that I have discovered that I like. So we're going to take that, throw it right in with the cabbage. We're going to get a couple of different colors of green going on in here today, so this is going to give you a little variation in the colors. We're going to throw a little scallion in there. Tip that off of there. Get rid of the root end. Place that thinly on the bias. Again, cutting on the bias helps keep the green onions from rolling all over your countertop and your board, makes them just a little easier to manage. And if you want something a little milder than scallion, you can throw a little chives or something like that in there. It'll still give you a little bit of an onion flavor without being quite so powerful. But if you go kind of thin on these and don't go crazy with them, then it's a pretty manageable flavor profile. And we're going to throw in some jalapeno too. Now, if you've never cut a jalapeno before, there's a couple of different ways you can do this. I have found a very easy way is to lay it down like this here, and then just kind of come in and take the sides off. Now, depending on how hot you like things, keep in mind that most of the heat in most chili peppers is in the seeds and in the ribs. So, since not everybody in my household likes really hot food, we are going to go a little mild on the heat on that. And I got a little bit of the rib there. Just slide that right out of there. You're still going to get a little bit of zing here, so that's one of the reasons I'm wearing the glove. If you've ever handled peppers before without using a little bit of caution, I can assure you that it can be very unpleasant next time you rub your eyes. Okay, so get some of the nonsense off the board here. And we're just going to do a nice fine dice on these. Just lay those out. Take them into little narrow strips. If you get a couple seeds in there, it's not the end of the universe. Just be aware that that can really affect your final product as far as the spice goes. And then we're just going to take that again into nice fine dice. And that was a pretty sizable pepper. You don't have to use the whole thing if you don't want to. I'm going to. Okay, so that is the majority of the vegetables we're going to be putting in there. Now I'm using a large bowl here because we're going to be mixing this here in a few minutes. And trust me, trying to mix this stuff in a bowl that's a little too small does not work out very well. So into this, we are going to, I'll hold off on the line for a second here. We're going to, can you see that okay in the camera? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. We're going to add a little bit of sugar, about a teaspoon. You don't need a lot unless you like a sweeter coleslaw. Some people do, but a little bit actually brightens things up very nicely. And we're going to start off with about half a teaspoon of salt. You definitely want to use a little salt anytime you're doing coleslaw. It's going to have a couple of different actions. Not only is it going to give you some flavor, it's also going to help draw some of the moisture out of the cabbage and any other vegetables you put in there, and it's going to make your dressing work a little easier. So we got a little bit of sugar, a little bit of salt. We've got half a lime here. Go ahead and squeeze that in there. Now, a lot of your traditional coleslaws, stuff I grew up on, was usually made with vinegar. I didn't care for it. But a lot of people make it that way. A lot of people like it that way. Nothing wrong with it. And if you prefer a more traditional coleslaw, then you can certainly do that. This has got a little bit of a tropical vibe going on to it. And we'll talk about a couple of different directions you can take this here when you get going. So, yes, and one more thing we're going to do a little of. Mayonnaise. Now, A lot of different ways you can do coleslaw. Not everything has to be a creamy coleslaw. This one here is. You don't need a ton, but that's probably, I don't know, 3-4 tablespoons of mayonnaise. We're going to start off a little light on that. If we need to add a little bit more, we can. So you can either use a pair of tongs or wooden spoon, spatula, any of those different things. We're going to give this a little bit of a toss. And it's going to look a little on the dry side, but don't sweat that too much, because you're going to let this sit for at least a half hour, 40 minutes before you serve it. Probably an hour or two in the fridge is even better. Overnight is no problem. And what's going to happen, the salt and the sugar and the the salt and sugar that are in the mayonnaise, because there is some in there, those things working together are going to work to draw a little moisture out of the vegetables. It's going to cause them to wilt down a little bit. They're going to get a little bit more tender that way. They'll still have a nice crunch to them, but that there, very simple coleslaw. Give it 1 second here and try that. Just check my seasoning on that. Pretty good. I'm gonna add a little bit more mayo. Not a ton. You can always add more later. It's really difficult to get it back out of there once you add it though, so keep that in mind. Now, this stuff here, you can certainly serve as you would a lot of a classic coleslaw. This goes just fine with barbecue chicken, pulled pork, hamburgers, hot dogs, any of that picnic food. Given some of the flavors we've worked with in here, you can also take this very easily into an Asian or a Southwest direction. Depending on what you like. This goes great with tacos. Really versatile. There's a lot of things you can do with this. Simple coleslaw. That's pretty much what I've got for you today. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.